Hi, I'm Bill Donohue of the Catholic League. I'd like to take this opportunity here in February of 2010 to talk about a new report. It's all over Fox News and other media agencies are talking about it. It's called Stand and Deliver: Sex, Health, and Young People in the 21st Century. Who put it out? The International Planned Parenthood Federation. And what their argument is basically is this: we've got to have, quote, sexual and reproductive health rights for young people. Sexual rights for young people. What exactly are they talking about? Well, they are legitimately concerned about sexually transmitted diseases, out-of-wedlock pregnancies, and the like. Everybody is concerned about these issues. But they begin on page 5 of their report, it's 44 pages in length, with this argument. The taboo on youth sexuality is one of the key forces driving the AIDS epidemic and high rates of teenage pregnancy and maternal mortality. They're wrong about that, people. They're dead wrong about that. And that's the predicate upon which this report is based. As a matter of fact, the taboo was the reason why we didn't have large rates of illegitimacy and sexually transmitted diseases in the past. For example, go back to the 1950s. Sex education didn't even exist in the schools in this country. AIDS wasn't even discovered until 1981. The pill was not even available commercially until 1960. Now, everybody knows by looking at the data, it's not a matter of opinion, that in the 1950s we had low rates of illegitimacy, out-of-wedlock births, low rates of sexually transmitted diseases, and as I say, AIDS didn't even exist. It was precisely because we had a taboo, in the best sense of the word, that young people were told that it was wrong. Just as we tell them wrong today to engage in smoking, we don't have any problem with that, or to eat fat food and trans fats. Oh God, we're very much concerned about that. They were told back then not to engage in sexuality in those young years. But of course, now we see from the abstinence-only education studies that that argument of teaching abstinence only does make a great deal of sense. Planned Parenthood doesn't get it. They're invested ideologically. They want to sexually engineer our society, particularly young people. I'm getting to that in a minute. But they also have an economic investment. There's an awful lot of money tied up in it, people, not only in the form of tens of millions of dollars from the taxpayers, but also from the foundations and wealthy people in our society who believe in their program. Who are they talking about with young people? They're talking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds? 21-year-olds? No. Try 10. It's not my opinion. Take a look at the report. Here's a quote. IPPF, International Planned Parenthood Federation, uses the terms young people, youth, and adolescents interchangeably to refer to people who are between 10 and 24 years of age. 10. You're in the 5th grade at the age of 10. A few years off your tricycle. And they're going to sexually engineer these kids the way that somebody who's 24 who's in graduate school. This is the irresponsibility of Planned Parenthood. What do they want? They want, quote, comprehensive sexuality education. They say it's the most important thing, a gift that parents can give to their children. That's their words. Why is it so important as a gift to children that parents have to engage them in comprehensive sex education? Can't they wait a few years, and perhaps into their teen years, before we might get them involved in what they call comprehensive sex education, which, believe me, people, is quite comprehensive. There's nothing left to the imagination. Typical of the left, they look at everything through the lens of power. There's a kind of a quasi-Marxist element that even infuses this report. Again, take a look what they say. Sexuality is about a lot more than having sex. Really? So what is it? It is about the social rules, economic structures, political battles, and religious ideologies that surround physical expressions of intimacy and the relationships within which such intimacy takes place. Economic structures and political battles? I mean, even the Marxist and people like Wilhelm Reich, the Hungarian Marxist Freudian, didn't even talk in such glorified language. Again, it just goes to show you how corrupt Planned Parenthood is. Now, here we get to the part of what concerns the Catholic League. So what is the problem to this idea of genital liberation, this full-blown experience of sexuality? Religion. You got it. Here it is. Culture, religion, and traditions are some of the biggest obstacles in implementing sexual and reproductive health programs. Well, let's think about that, people. Let's break it down. Let's have a little Sociology 101, okay? Culture is the most defining aspect of society. It constitutes all the norms, values, and institutions. The heart of culture is religion. Religion and culture would include traditions. So, what kind of a sentence is it to talk about culture, religion, and traditions are some of the biggest obstacles? I mean, everything in society that exists is an obstacle to what Planned Parenthood thinks as sexual education? Who are the problems? Well, you knew they'd come around to Catholics. But we got to put the Catholics in there with the Islamicists. Oh, yeah. The distinction between Sister Mary and Imam Muhammad is now this big, people. Here's a quote. Young people's sexuality is still contentious for many religious institutions. Fundamentalists and other religious groups, the Catholic Church and madrasas, Islamic schools, have imposed tremendous barriers that prevent young people from obtaining sex information. Now look, Sister Mary Alice does teach sex education. Hello, people. She talks about responsible sex education. In the madrasas, in the Islamic schools, they don't have sex education. And if they have it at all, they're talking about how homosexuality is a sin punishable by death. There is a profound difference between the two. But of course, if you're an anti-Catholic bigot and you are a devotee of Planned Parenthood, and they certainly are, people, then it would make sense to throw the Catholics in there with the radical Muslims. That makes a great deal of sense. Now, in conclusion, their program, typical of the left, it has to be mandatory. Make comprehensive sexuality education mandatory in the school. You know, they've learned absolutely nothing. When kids knew the least about sex, they engaged the least in it. That's not an argument that we have to return back to the 1950s and everything. What it is this. Anybody who says that progressive sex education leads to a decline in herpes and other forms of venereal disease and abortion rates and illegitimacy is either a fool or lying. Quite frankly, I guess we have nothing but dunces in the parochial schools these days, yet those dunces, when it comes to sex education, are not the ones walking around with the high rates of herpes and abortion rates and illegitimacy like the wonderkins in the public schools. They've become the masters of sexuality, and they're the ones who are stuck with all the baggage. Thank you so much for listening.